So let's start with topic 11's Form 4 Chapter 6 Prepare Salt. So to know which method to prepare a salt, you must know the solubility of salts. So how to memorize which salt is soluble, which salt is not soluble. So SPN, any salt that with sodium, potassium, ammonium nitrate will be all soluble salts. Okay, so SPAN is all soluble salt. S stands for sodium, potassium, ammonium, and nitrate. Any salt with these four, like sodium chloride, sodium nitrate, sodium sulfate, whatever, sodium will be all soluble. Okay. Now, any salt with carbonate, COOH, it will be insoluble. So, who is CO? CO stands for carbonate. O stand for oxide, OH stand for hydroxide. So most of the carbonate, oxide, hydroxide will be not soluble unless they are sparse salt, means example, sodium carbonate, potassium carbonate, sodium oxide, sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, all this is soluble. And the rest will be insoluble. Okay, then after that, for sulfate and chloride. So for sulfate and chloride, right, most of them are soluble except these six. So for chloride, got three not soluble: persatuan, agama, Hindu, PbCl, AgCl, HCl is not soluble. Then for sulfate, all soluble except persatuan, basachina, PbSO4, BSO4, and CaSO4. Now, based on the solubility, we will need to prepare different salts. So first, if the salt is sparse salt, it's a soluble salt and it's sparse, means any salt with sodium, potassium, ammonium, you'd use method one, which is you need to use acid and alkaline. So example, I want to prepare sodium chloride. So you know acid is H plus, alkaline is OH minus. So the first chemical you needed will be the HCl, so hydrochloric acid, and then NaOH. So once you take the HCl and NaOH, you titrate, you'll get this salt. Okay, so which is very similar to neutralization. So the procedure very simple. You just take sodium hydroxide into the conical flask, okay, and put phenolphthalein. Burette, you add hydrochloric acid and then titrate. After that, you'll get a number, means you need how much acid. Let's say you need 25 cm cube of the acid to neutralize the alkaline. Then after you in this round, you repeat the experiment without the phenolphthalein. Why need to repeat? Because the first two steps, right, is for you to know how much acid to neutralize the alkaline. But you cannot extract the salt. Okay, acid plus alkaline becomes salt and water. You cannot extract the salt because inside got phenolphthalein. So you repeat the whole experiment without phenolphthalein. But how do you know whether the salt is when it's neutral? So you use back the original volume 25, neutralize it already. Once you neutralize it already, right, you have this salt and water, and the sodium chloride is in the water. How do you take it out? You need to use the 5 process: heat, cool, filter, rinse, and dry. Okay, is heat, cool, filter, rinse, and dry. You can memorize it using hippo, can, fly, really, dangerous. Okay, so first, because the salt is in the water, you can't take it out. So first thing, example, this is the beaker. You have to heat until saturated. So this is the explanation. The salt solution is heated until 1/3 of original volume, means originally this much, heat until 1/3. But you must do it to obtain a saturated solution. Must do it in evaporating dish, because evaporating dish, they have big surface area, it will evaporate very fast. Okay. Then after that, second step, the hot saturated solution is allowed to cool down. When you let him to cool down, right, because hot solution can dissolve more salt. When the solution at lower temperature cool down already, it dissolves lesser salt. So the difference, the salt will come out. So you get salt crystal here. So after that, you filter out the salt crystal. The salt crystal will be remain here. Rinse with a little distilled water, a little enough because it's a soluble salt. Then dry them between sheets of filter paper. Okay, so this is the first one. But this one, experiment with lesser chance come up. The one that frequent come out in SPM will be this. the method 2. So for method 2 is prepare soluble salt but non-SPA, means not Na, not K, not NH3. So example, I want to prepare zinc sulfate. Zinc sulfate is a soluble salt because soluble salt only got sulfate is all soluble except persatuan bahasa Cina. So you just remember soup is persatuan bahasa Cina, okay? Then the CL persatuan agama Hindu, you can imagine C stand for curry. Curry is persatuan agama Hindu, example. So this is a soluble salt. So for soluble salt, right, in order to prepare soluble salt, you use insoluble to prepare because soluble and soluble very hard to separate. So this is a soluble salt. You use insoluble to prepare. So who is insoluble? SPAN soluble. Then COOH is insoluble, so you take the COOH up. Then for insoluble salt, you want him to dissolve in water, you use acid. So the example here would be first, the acid needed will be the sulfuric acid. Okay, then here you use the 4 things that zinc means the metal oxide, metal hydroxide, and metal carbonate. Okay, so you need to use this as example. So the idea is this because zinc sulfate is a soluble salt. We use insoluble to prepare because we know that SPAN is soluble, COOH is insoluble. Okay, so means example, let's say I want to use the 4 chemical needed would be zinc carbonate, zinc oxide, and then zinc hydroxide. Okay, so but all this is not soluble in water. Means let's say it is a water. If you throw zinc, you add zinc oxide into the water, it don't have reaction because it is not soluble in water. It won't dissolve in the water. The only method to let some insoluble thing to dissolve in water, you go back to the topic 9. Okay, we know one of the property of the acid and base, one of the chemical reaction for the acid will be acid can react metal carbonate, metal oxide, and metal hydroxide. So this come to this conclusion that acid can react metal carbonate, metal oxide, and metal hydroxide. So we use acids to react with the first one is the zinc, then zinc carbonate, zinc oxide, and zinc hydroxide. But in SPM, right, if they let you choose, try to choose carbonate and oxide, these two. This one will be is a more safe during that. Okay, so now let's say I want to prepare zinc sulfate. Okay, I will choose to use sulfuric acid react with the zinc oxide. Okay, so now the first step you need to do is you have to add sulfuric acid into the beaker. Okay, then after that, so sulfuric acid, first step, sulfuric acid is added to the beaker. Then you start to heat the acid. The reason you heat the acid is because, like example, if you're putting the milk powder into cold water, you stir, it's very hard to dissolve. But you heat the water until like slightly hot, warm water, you add the milk powder, will be easier to dissolve. So in order for the zinc oxide powder easier to dissolve, you add the zinc oxide powder into the heated acid. Heated acid will be easier to dissolve. So add the zinc oxide powder inside. Okay, zinc oxide powder. So after you add the zinc oxide powder inside, you stir until excess. Excess means what? The sulfuric acid has been used up because when you add the powder until no more reaction means all the acid finish already. So after finish already, right, inside will be zinc sulfate solution plus the excess powder zinc oxide. Okay, plus the excess powder extra. Okay. Then after you add extra already, all the acid finish already, left the metal oxide powder. Then how do you take it out? You remove by filtration. Means you take a filter. Okay, you pour this thing in. After you pour this thing in, right, the residue, the solid will remain as residue. Then the filtrate will be the zinc sulfate. After that, how do you take it out? Because zinc sulfate is a soluble salt, it will be in the water. So in the water, how do you take it out? It's like the previous one, using the process heat, cool, filter, rinse, and dry. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, first thing, you heat until 1/3 of original volume. So once you heat until 1/3 of original volume, right, it becomes saturated. When it becomes saturated, the solid will form after cool down. After cool down already, you get the solid already. Then the next one, you filter. Because when you filter, the zinc sulfate will come out. Because zinc sulfate is become salt crystal. So the zinc sulfate will come out. The remaining solution here. Then you rinse it with a little distilled water. Dry them between sheets of filter paper. You'll get a zinc sulfate crystal. Okay, so this is the second method. Okay, for the third method, this is how it works. Because PbSO4 is not soluble. As I told you just now, SO4 is all soluble except persatuan bahasa China. So PbSO4 is not soluble in water. So if not soluble in water, soluble we use insoluble. So insoluble we use back soluble. So this is an insoluble salt. We use soluble salt to prepare. So the first recommended will be Pb nitrate. Then the second one, you can choose any one. Sodium sulfate, potassium sulfate, or ammonium sulfate. Okay. So this is very simple because this two is a soluble salt. Okay, soluble salt means what? Inside got Pb2 plus and NO3 minus. Okay, plus another solution. Inside got Na plus and SO4 2 minus. So both you put inside a beaker. Nitrate, put inside a beaker. Potassium sulfate, put inside the same beaker. After that, when these two mixed up together, right? Okay, the ion will start to mix. Pb and NO3 will be inside. Then Na and SO4 also will be inside. Then the Pb will meet with SO4, then they'll hug together and become solid. And then because our aim is to prepare PbSO4, so very simple now, you just filter. No need to do anything, just filter this solution. After you filter, right, the PbSO4 is insoluble, it will become a residue. The remaining part will be the sodium nitrate. So after that, you filter. This time only filter. You rinse, wash, then dry. So if soluble salt, you do heat and cool so that the salt crystal come out. For the insoluble salt, already in solid state. So you just filter out, rinse it, and then dry it. Okay, we look at some sample questions. Let's say lead-2 chloride is an insoluble salt. This one quite a good question. They tell you it's an insoluble salt. So insoluble salts, we use soluble to prepare SPAM. Okay, so the chemical needed will be first Pb nitrate. Plus, on this side, you can choose any one. Sodium, potassium, ammonium nitrate also can. Ammonium chloride. Okay, I choose sodium chloride. Then it become PbCl2 plus 2 NaOH. NaNO3. Okay, so after that, how do you write the step? It's very simple. First, pour in step number 1, pour in 50 cm cube, 1 mole per dm cube of lead-2 nitrate solution. This is step number 1. Step number 2, measure the 50 cm cube of sodium chloride solution and pour into a beaker. So mix them together. After you mix them together, okay, they will start to form the insoluble salt. So, okay, step number 3, you pour them together, you stir with glass straw. So when you stir with glass straw, right, they will mix together, and Pb and Cl, right, they are not soluble. So when you mix them together, right, Pb will meet with Cl, become insoluble salt. And then how do you take out this salt? It's very simple. You take a filter, filter, rinse, and dry. Then you filter this mixture, right? The insoluble salt will be on top. Then the solution form will be below. The sodium nitrate will be become the filtrate. Then you just rinse this salt, then dry it. Okay. Then we go for the second one. What do you use to prepare copper 2 sulfate solution? So for copper 2 sulfate solution, CuSO4 is a soluble salt. So soluble salt, we need to use insoluble COOH plus the H plus acid. So the first acid needed will be H2SO4 plus, as I said, the best you choose oxide. So you choose copper 2 oxide. Okay, then after that, you'll get CuSO4 plus H2. Okay, now this is a solution. This is a solid. Then this is a solution. So the first step, you will need to add the sulfuric acid into a measuring cylinder and then put inside a beaker. Then have to heat the acid. After you heat the acid already, you have to start to add in my copper 2 oxide powder inside. Okay. Now, when you add this into here until excess, right, you realize that the acid will be completely red, no acid left. Then at the end, you will get copper 2 sulfate solution. But because I got add excess oxide powder, okay, so inside will have some CO that not yet dissolved. So you filter the unreacted powder, you filter out. Okay, filter out already. Then left this solution, but this salt is a soluble in water. So how to take it out? You have to do the processor, heat, cool, filter, rinse, and dry to extract out the salt. Heat until saturated, means heat until 1/3. Let him cool down so that the salt come out. Then filter out the salt, rinse it, dry it, you will get the salt crystal. Okay, so you look at another sample question here. Copper 2 chloride is to ask you to prepare copper 2 chloride. So the step is very simple. CuCl2 is a soluble salt. So you need to prepare with insoluble. Okay, so the first chemical needed will be HCl. Plus, we choose copper 2 oxide. So it becomes CuCl2 plus H2. Put 2 here. Okay, so this will be a solution. It will be a solid. This will be a solution. Okay, so now the first steps you need to do is you need to put acid, okay, into a beaker. Okay, so 50 cm cube, 0.5 mole per dm cube hydrochloric acid is added into the beaker. Then after that, you will start to heat the acid. Okay, the next step will be heating the acid. Then you start to add the copper 2 oxide powder until excess. Until excess means you add until it no longer dissolves. Start to add the copper 2 oxide powder until excess. So when until excess, your acid all complete red because no more acid. Okay. So once your acid complete red, what is left over here will be CuO, the extra solid, and also plus CuO and HCl will produce CuCl2. So you get the solution inside. Then how do you separate the solid and insoluble? You use the filter. Okay, you filter. After filter out, right, the CuO will be on top, then the CuCl will be below. Okay, then how do you take out the salt? Because CuCl is a soluble salt. How do you take it out? You go through the 5 processor, heat, cool, filter, rinse, and dry, as I mentioned before. So how does it work? Very simple one. You heat until, because the CuCl is dissolved into the water, so what you need to do is you heat until saturated, heat until like 1/3 of original volume. Then let him cool down. When it cool down, the salt crystal will form. After salt crystal is formed, right, you filter. Because when you filter, The insoluble will be on top, so the CuCl will be on top. Then you rinse it, wash it with water. After that, dry it, then you'll get the copper 2 chloride salt. Then for barium sulfate is an insoluble salt. Okay, so for barium sulfate is an insoluble salt. So we need to prepare using SPAN. Okay, so the first one is barium nitrate. Plus the other side is sodium sulfate. Then you'll get your barium sulfate plus sodium nitrate. Okay, so this is a soluble salt, this is a soluble salt, this is a soluble salt, this is an insoluble salt. Okay, so first step, put in the 50 cm³ of barium nitrate, then put in 50 cm³ of sodium sulfate, pour them together, stir. Once you stir already, you will get the insoluble salt. How do you take out this insoluble salt? Because the insoluble salt is inside the soluble salt. So very simple one, you just filter. You see, let's say I draw a filter here. So if you pour this thing in, the barium sulfate is insoluble, but it will become residue. Then the soluble salt will come out as a filtrate. So you just filter first. After that, rinse and then dry.